Hi, welcome to the second episode of Empower Your Magical Self. I'm Leah, the Mystic Autistic, and I'm your host. We are going to have a great show today. We're coming up on fall. I live by the season for the most part, as opposed to the year, and don't think so much in terms of the entire year as I think of the seasons. When I'm thinking about my goals and the things I want to do, as a year is just a little bit too much. As you know, I'm autistic. Maybe it's a trait of that. Maybe it's something entirely different, but that helps my brain work better. So I'm really excited about the fall and finishing up the next portion of this year, the next 12 weeks of this year. My guest today is the magnificent, phenomenal Patrick Jasper Lee. He is one of my favorite writers in the whole world. You may not have heard of him, but that's all right, because we're going to remedy that today. This is the first book of his that I read, We Borrow the Earth. This book, as I said, is the first book that I read by Jasper Lee. He goes by Jasper, so let's just call him Jasper. And he has written quite a few books, but there's 5 that I would say are sort of canon. And this is the first one. There are 2 nonfiction books, this one and another one called Coming Home to the Trees. And then there are 3 fiction books, which are real page turners. And I didn't really expect to like them as much as I liked these, but they are all phenomenal books. Highly, highly recommend them all. I have so many books that I can't really physically take any more on at this point, so I buy them digitally. But this one was so special to me that I bought a physical copy, which is a little bit unusual for me. So that tells you a little bit about how much I love this book. Among many other things, Jasper and I will be talking about his Romani Gypsy heritage and his role in his culture as a Shavano, or a medicine man. It's probably a term that we in the West have more familiarity with. We'll also be talking about our ancestors, but maybe not the kind of ancestors that you are thinking about. These are not necessarily the ancestors that we have written back in the family Bible, or even are going to trace back to county records. Jasper has gotten me on this track of being really connected to my prehistoric ancestors. Sounds kind of strange, but maybe it won't after you hear this episode. I've written a lot about it at Medium. Later in the episode, during a break, I'm going to read an article that I wrote for Medium about where I feel like our ancestors maybe took a wrong turn. And my ideas about that are very much influenced by Jasper's work and about his call for us to herald back to our prehistoric ancestors of 5,000 years ago and earlier, which is actually the vast majority of human history was lived in that time. We have only been modern for about the last 5, if you want to be really, really generous, we've been modern maybe for the last 10,000 years since we started farming and having cities. But we have been human for over 200,000 years. We have only been this way for about 5% of the time. Think about that when you listen to this interview that I do with Jasper. So glad that you've joined us, and I know you're going to absolutely love this interview with Jasper Lee.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Good morning from Colorado.
Yeah, and good early evening from Wales.
It's so lovely to be talking to you. I really, really thank you for taking the time to do this. I know I kind of popped out of nowhere for you.
That's okay. I only do it for sincere people, so.
Nothing if not sincere, almost to a fault, I think. Yeah. So for the people who don't know your work and don't know who you are, would you just kind of indulge me in describing yourself and your work a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was brought up in the Romani Gypsy tradition. We would read omens, we would look for signs, and we'd actually laugh about it. We wouldn't go, oh my God, there's an omen, what do we do about that? We would sort of laugh about it. Had the role of Shavano passed on to me.
For people who don't know what a Shavano is, could you please explain that just briefly? I just want to fill people in. Thank you.
the role of Shavano is all about being a Romani Gypsy medicine man. And some people would say it's like a shaman, but I never like to use that word. And people say to me, but you should, because, that's what it is. But I suppose that sort of role has been so abused in many ways by modern people so I tend to just say medicine man, which is enough, Now that means that I take care of the community, their social, emotional, their mental needs. Anything that they've got wrong with any part of their system, they would come to me. Now that doesn't mean to say that I'm a herbalist, that's a different department, or I did stuff like that. Mine is purely to do with, it's person-centered. It's purely to do with helping the person on an emotional and social level. So any kind of problems that relationships, anything like that, then people would end up coming to you. So that was what was passed down to me.
Okay.
Also contacting the other world. So the Shavano contacts the other world, gets in touch with the spirits, gets in touch with the ancestors, with all those who come close to you and help your particular tribe or your particular people. So I was sort of loaded with this role from an early age.
I'm sure that you're aware then that in America there's maybe even a bigger misconception about your culture than there is in Europe. They think that gypsy, if they don't think that is just a term for vagabond, they think that people like myself tend to think, oh, well, that's a slur. And so we shouldn't say that word. So could you kind of help me and Americans in general understand, should we say the word? Should we not say the word?
Yeah. It's true. It's very much the same here in this part of Europe. That some Romani people don't like to use the word gypsy. I think if it's used in a derogatory sense, then it's not very good to use. But I don't mind if people say the word gypsy. I think one way it's misused is people call themselves a gypsy if they're just wandering, and that's not really what it was about. I mean, the word originally came from Egyptian. Well, we built the pyramids, but that's generally the idea that people thought that we came from Egypt when we didn't really. We came from India and the Middle East. But there was, you might remember it from the book, but there was a settlement in Greece.
Little Egypt, right?
Calling it Little Egypt, yes. So that, when they crossed over into Greece, and then they travelled further up, and some went east to Eastern Europe, and some went west to Britain, some went north to Scandinavia, and some kept going west and ended up in America. When people used to say gypsy, they thought it meant Egyptian, so they would tell the gypsies that you come from Egypt, and the gypsies would say, yeah, we built the pyramids, and they go, wow, did you? Yeah.
Why not?
So that's how it happened. But I agree with you that it all depends how you use the word gypsy. I think that's the crux of the matter. If you use it in a derogatory sense, it's not good. But I don't mind. Romani gypsy sounds good.
Gypsy,
people that your background kind
of. How do we, as people who are not Romani gypsies, engage in your culture, learn from you in a respectful way without culturally appropriating?
Yeah. I think the best way to look at it is that when people come to me to learn, I talk about my culture, but I don't want to talk about it in the sense that people are coming just to learn that. I see it as a stepping stone. Really, I have no role within my own culture now because my family have all broken apart like many tribal people across the world. There used to be many of us when I was a child, but they've all broken apart. Some have died, some have moved on. So I cannot act out my role in my own family. So from my point of view, if I'm to act out this role as Shivano at all, it's acting it out with everyone I come into contact with, people in my workshops, people who train with me about life, all that sort of thing. So when I'm with people, I see that I provide a kind of stepping stone to help people understand life more, because that's what I can do in my role. And this probably goes a little bit beyond the culture. Well, it's where the culture leads, let's put it that way. So it's like a stepping stone. So I teach people how to live every day, and I draw off the culture to do that. I help them to manage their lives. I help them to manage all their problems. That's what I would do if I were in Gypsy camp. That's what I would do. I would come out of my bender, my hut, and people would say, I've got this problem. And I would say, oh, okay, let's walk and talk about this. And we might walk in the wood, we might walk around, and I'd find something that they could do to help their problem. I do not teach people to become shamans, because you can't do that. Everything people get from me is authentic, it's real, and it's me and the other person talking to each other, because that's what I was trained to do. So, which seems complex in some ways, but it's not. It's simple.
Your books are, to my knowledge, unique. And I want to get that across to people. And I think I remember in somewhere reading that you said that maybe the fiction was your favorite.
Yes.
Okay.
No, you didn't know. That is absolutely true.
And why is that?
Yeah. The fiction is my favorite because I was able to inject far more reality of what the culture is all about into that. It was wonderful when you said you'd read those books, because I thought, you're picking up on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always tell people this, but they always thirst for the factual books. Well, the factual books are good, but you're sort of limited, whereas you've got artistic license to explore more of all the intricacies of the culture when you write fiction. So that's what I did. And that's why I wanted to write The Long Reflection, because that's what it enables people to do, to see more into the culture in an imaginative sense, and then draw their own conclusions. So it's a good thing to do, really. So so there is more truth in it.
And just for people who don't know, I just want to fill them in. The Long Reflection is a 3-part series that follows, I don't want to say a family, but culture remembers generations. Okay.
Generational thing, yeah.
And it starts in about 1000 AD-ish?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, I tried to go in line with what they've discovered, although they're not. This might not be accurate, but there is a lot of schools of thought believe that the Romani people left India and the Middle East at that time. So that's what I was trying to do, and trying to show the change, that came over most of the generations, ending up with total chaos. With Leela Sky, going nuts, and then
Leela Sky. Okay, I never knew how to say it. So Leela Sky. Okay,
Leela Sky. Yeah,
I was thinking Laleski, but it's Leela Sky.
No,
okay,
you can say that.
Well, I want to say it like
Laleski for short.
Then that's what I latched onto, because I thought I can say that. That is one of the most memorable and kind of disturbing characters who I have run across. In a long time, and he has really stayed with me more than the other characters, and I didn't want him to. So I'm about ready for him to go gay. No, he's I think that I don't know how much this was your intention, but he seemed to capture a particular strand of psychosis in our time, not maybe just in your culture, but just in the world. Is that accurate, would you feel?
Yes, that was what I was trying to show, that tribal people were coming through the ages and they were being affected by the modern world and the way and the influence it was beginning to have, especially in the Middle Ages, and going up through that time. I think there were so many changes that many people went through, and to some extent, considering that we're all tribal people, if you go back, our ancestors were all tribal people. Considering that, we've all been subject to that in many ways. I teach my students this. I say, it's not just me that's tribal. You've all had tribal connections way back. If you prick your finger, blood comes out. That's the blood of your ancestors. That's quite remarkable when you think about it. So we've all been affected by those mental and emotional and social disturbances that everybody went through at that time, and we're still suffering from that today. So that's one of the things I like to do, is to try and help people to reconnect with their ancestry so that they can get back to something like that thousands of years ago, so the likes of Leela Sky can sort of fade a little bit with his psychosis.
Oh my goodness. In terms of ancestors, going back, and I watched one of your, I want to make sure that I'm making clear that I know a lot of the answers from your work, but I want to make it clear to people who don't know your work. So I know that you are talking primarily about ancestors way back in prehistoric times.
Yeah.
That has been incredibly helpful for me as an American woman, because as you know, most white Americans carry some sort of guilt about what has happened.
Yeah, sure.
At the hands of Americans in terms of the Indian genocide and slavery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So myself included, a lot of people in America who try to be sensitive to social justice issues do not want to think about our ancestors, because we are kind of ashamed, because a lot of our ancestors were slaveholders and did reprehensible things. So your work for me has helped me move beyond that period of time and back. And I would like for you to maybe speak a little bit more on that in terms of the American imagination and ancestry and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've touched upon something that is quite important, really, because even here, people, when I talk about ancestors, people automatically tend to think of parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and, you could trace your immediate line, you could go back 200, 300 years, but that's not what we need to be looking at. And particularly with people who Westerners who find themselves, in America, Australia, New Zealand, all the places Western people have spread out to, it's so important for them to realize that way back we had something that tied us together. And if we don't go back that far, I always say go back about 5,000 years, and people think, what? I don't know anyone 5,000 years in my line. That doesn't matter. Nobody does. None of us know who we're looking at. If we go back through the generations about 5,000 years, none of us know who they are. And it's not necessary to know. That is the thing. If we go back that far, we are bonded far more than we would be if we look back a little way, because the generations immediately behind us have suffered in just the same way we are suffering today. They suffered from, you mentioned how American people feel, the colonialism, and I think if we look far back, then we realize that when we were in Europe, our ancestors were in Europe, wherever we were in Europe, the same thing happened here. We were taken over. The wild people here were taken over, whether we're in the Middle East or whether we're in Europe. The same thing happened here. There was an invasion of modern life that took over. That's a long way back, obviously, but we were all affected by that. So ultimately, way back, we were all connected by a common bond, by a common thread. All the tribes, whether you look at Romani people, whether you look at Celtic people, We're all Indo-European. And there must be something, I always think, that is going to bond us together. And that's what people feel, which is what you've just described. And I think it helps us to redress the balance. It's true that when you are an American, you do think, as you just said, what's happened? What happened? My immediate ancestors must have come here. We don't always know what happened. Mm-hmm. But let's look back further. The main thing to remember is it's not your fault. It's no one's fault today that you are a product of the people who went to America or Australia or wherever you are. You are just a product of it, but we can all put it right by coming together and looking back at ancestry that is further back than that. Because if we sort of, time is weird, isn't it? If we sort of,
time is so weird.
If we sort of squeeze it together, and then we've got someone from 5,000 years ago and us, and we're together, like really bonded, then it gets rid of all that stuff that's in between. And that's what we're obliged to do now. We've got to do this. It's time we did this. And I'm on a mission. You're right when you say a mission. Yeah. I'm on a mission with this because I think that the Western people have a lot to discover about their ancestry.
I hope you're enjoying this interview with Jasper Lee. I think he's absolutely fascinating, and just the sound of his voice makes me happy. He's such a happy guy. I just really love talking to him, and I hope that you're enjoying it. I had a story published in Medium called Shadow and Our Ancestor, a parable about how things got this bad. It was published in May of this year. It was inspired by Jasper's work. It also echoes my own work on the polyvagal nervous system and how magical the fact that we can control so much of our reality through our breath and through consciousness of our nervous system and what's going on around us. So this story is called Shadow and Our Ancestor, a parable about how things got this bad. Once upon a time, and for almost 200,000 years, we had one common language. Not just humans, but animals, trees, water, fire, rock, everything understood this language and communicated in it. That way of knowing that we attribute to animals, that's just the normal state of being. And humans had it too for most of the time we've been around. For all those tens of thousands of years, we did all right as a species. We lived in harmony with nature. We were living at peak happiness. At some point, we can't be sure when, something we can only describe as shadow crept into humanity, whispering about things that humans could have if only they would just set themselves apart from the natural world. For most humans, that seemed absurd. Why would they want things? What even does have mean? When you're living in the moment, no past, no future, just present. What brings comfort and joy in the moment is all that matters. They had what they needed, and they cooperated with nature, hunting and gathering, living in cozy caves with fire and family, laughing, telling jokes, playing, going for walks. But wouldn't it be better, Shadow kept whispering to any human who would listen, if you had all the food, and people had to obey you and worship you to get any of it? Usually the humans who could hear Shadow said, "No, that sounds stupid," and went on about their lives. But it only took a few humans to listen. And when they did, things started falling apart. The center simply could not hold. That's what monotheism calls the fall from grace. They try to blame it on women and snakes, two things they generally find problematic, but that's just a metaphor. Once Shadow got into humanity, things began to unravel quickly. The beginning of agriculture led to hoarding, and soon there were cities, and before anyone knew what was happening, no one could understand the common language anymore. Before long, everything that wasn't human, the animals, the fire, the wind, the ocean, and everything else, could no longer understand humans. And because we could no longer understand much of anything except our own greed, we decided to rule over everything for our comfort, disregarding the well-being of the whole, scraping the womb of Mother Earth for shiny bits to hoard. Monarchy and monotheism have hastened the end of humanity's glory days, and things have generally gone downhill since then in terms of happiness. Now, about 10,000 years after shadow crept in, about 5% of the time we've been modern humans, we're on the verge of collapse as a species. Those who've managed to hoard the most are desperately trying to leave the planet that shadow has encouraged us to rape. Our brains, bodies, and nervous systems are built for a life of foraging, living simply in caves and enjoying life in the Garden of Eden. Instead, we're following Shadow's lead through a nightmarish world of unreality where ringing phones and traffic take the place of natural predators, putting us in a constant state of fight or flight that isn't even deserved or earned. Most of us have never even heard of rest or digest. Too many of us can hardly imagine a joyful, comfortable, shame-free life. But we have a lot of plastic stuff, and billionaires are going to space, so it's cool. Now back to my interview with Jasper Lee.
Your people have been subjected to horrible persecution throughout the ages. It's not just a fun wagon ride through time with bells and tambourines that I want people to know. I mean, honestly,
but you're absolutely right. And some of the things that I suppose it's very romanticized, isn't it? It's very romanticized, and you wouldn't believe some of the communications I've got from people saying, I know I was a gypsy in a past life, and and I danced and I twirled round, and then I knew I was a gypsy. They say all sorts of ridiculous things.
I'm sure they do.
A fun ride. It isn't a fun ride,
right?
It's anything but. And still, even today, basically, as a people, gypsies are at the bottom of the ladder. Really, we're still at that. I don't tell people if I don't know people, unless it's in my work. I don't tell people I'm Romani because I never know what the response is going to be, because they've got such crazy ideas, about us, and they've got sort of gypsy. It's. I don't know. You're still at the bottom of the pile, really, the social pile in many ways. And I think it's important. One of the main important features is, I think, to remember that we are a tribal people. I think a lot of people don't realise that.
Not here, anyway. Yeah.
No, we go right back, and a tribal thousands of years ago, the same way as any other tribal people, whether it's Native Americans, whether it's Africans, Aboriginal, it doesn't matter what they are, they're all the same. But the beauty of the Romanis is that because they grew up alongside civilized thinking, they worked with it. Mm-hmm. They were very, very clever and very canny about it. They were very skillful in maintaining their own culture, but saying, oh yes, we are with you as well, with the civilized people. And so much so that I still think it's extraordinary that when they were colonizing America, colonizing Australia, colonizing everywhere, subjecting all these poor tribal folk in other countries to all sorts of abominable things, the Romanis were still here down the road in their wood, in their benders, living as they've always done, still in their tribes. And this is only sort of right up to mid-20th century. So we lasted really far longer, but it's only because we didn't fight civilization. We didn't fight it. We pretended we were religious. We pretended we were pilgrims. We said, yes, sir, no, sir. And then we went back and we just said, okay, we'll just carry on as we are. And if they find us again, we'll just say, yeah, we're the same as you. We go to chapel.
Well, just your work has opened my mind so much to different ways of looking at the world and of thinking about the world. And that brings me to the point of animism, which is such a big point in your world and in your work, and really has helped me in my own mental struggles with living this modern life, because I never felt comfortable at all in any kind of a monotheistic construction. Mm-hmm. That just did not feel healthy nor natural to me. Mm-hmm. And so your approach and your animism, how you have described it, has really helped me and put me in a more healthy emotional and psychological state. So I'm hoping that other people can benefit from that as well and learn about that from this interview. So having said that, could you speak a little bit on animism and the rejection of monotheism, which your culture would never even got into, so you didn't have to reject it, but that's what I'm asking you to talk about now. Okay.
Yeah. I think basically, obviously, there's life in everything, and excuse me. I suppose it was easier to believe that it is easier to believe there's life in everything if you're living outside in the wood and you haven't got all the things around you that we have today in our civilized way of living. So I talk a lot about this in my workshops because people don't quite understand how it works. I think if you're looking at all the things you have around you in your life, in your home, you know, you look at your phone, your computer, your washing machine, your car, just everything you have around you. We would say all these things have a spirit, and we say that if they have a spirit, they'll work better for you because you can talk to them and they can even talk back sometimes, which is what we do in my immediate family. My wife and I do this all the time. But if you see that a tree has life and you can talk to a tree, and if you see your car has life, you talk to your car, what you have to remember is the tree has a life for its own sake. Anything that grows, moves and flows, such as trees, water, clouds, they are all invested with their own life. So if you speak to them, you've got something realistic. If you talk to your car, it's still a spirit, but it's an extension of you. That's the way we see it. So all the things in your home, your computer, your phone, whatever, you can still talk to them as a spirit, as an animistic spirit, but they are extensions of you because they're created, you know, they're for you. You purchase them to serve your needs. That is why when Romani people had a favorite teacup or something that was important to them when they die, they had to smash it. And that is because you are breaking down the object that is related to them, which helps them to move on. Do you see what I mean?
I do see.
Yeah. So if you're talking to a tree and you die, you wouldn't go and chop it down because it's got a life in its own
spirit. Right.
You
Okay.
see, anything of the natural world has got a life in its own right. Things that belong to you also have a spirit, but it's not in its own right. It doesn't exist without you. So that's why. It doesn't mean to say you have to destroy everything, obviously, when you die. But when you have personal things, like especially a teacup, we always used to, and I've done this with people. I've been into a wood and you smash it, and then it helps the spirit to go free of that person who's died. And that's why the Romani people used to set fire to their wagons. You might have come across that. That is why you can't pass that on. If it remains whole and it's passed on, then it might attract the spirit that's died to come back and occupy that wagon again. And you don't want that.
So because I mean, I've read a lot and I've studied your work and everything, but I think that so many people who grow up in a monotheistic, mainly Christian society, it's very difficult for them to conceive that okay, but who's on top?
Yeah.
You know, there's got to be this hierarchy.
I've had this conversation with people who've come to my workshops and they've been Christian, or they've been to a Christian school, they've been brought up as Christians. And when I talk about the greater ancestors, I don't know if you know about those, Ravnos, Kam, Shon and Puv.
Yes.
That's sky, sun, moon and earth. When I talk about them, these people tend to perceive them as spirits, but God is around them. And I say, no, that isn't the way we see it. They are there for their own sake. The earth is there for her own sake. She's not being created by anyone. she is the one who creates us, if you like. We're derivatives of Earth, or we should be. We don't act like that today, I know. But Christians or any religious people are so steeped in it that they always think that God created it. Or they think, as I had a conversation with someone recently, that the Christian God and the spirits, they're all one and the same thing. So they're not. God is man-made, is created by man.
Yeah.
And what we see is the natural world, and that is creator of itself, if you like. You want to see it that way. That is the highest you can go in the Romani way of seeing things, and in most tribal ways of seeing things. The earth is it, and God is man-made. So that's why when we when we used to say that we're Christian, we would pretend.
But gotta get by.
Yeah, some Romanis have turned to Christianity, but understandably, because everything's been stripped away from them. But never will I. Never.
Good. I wouldn't expect it. I would be saddened to hear it.
Yeah.
So that leads me to that your point of view, and part of what has been so helpful to me about your point of view is that it has helped me empower myself, because I see myself as equal to anything else, and there's nobody to answer to and to kowtow to.
Yeah.
And that is what is so empowering to me about your culture's point of view.
Yeah, we're all equal. Everything is. Well, yeah, there's no divinity. The only divine thing is the earth. Humans are not divine. My great-grandfather used to say humans are at the bottom of the pile, really, compared to animals, birds in the wild, because they don't lose anything. They retain their wildness. No matter what you do to them, even when you've got a domesticated cat or dog, there's still something of them that remains wild to an extent that you can't teach them to read and write. You can't teach them to do all. I mean, you can teach them so many things, but there's something of them that will stay, true to the earth's laws. Something we call McCarriban. I don't know if you came across that in the book.
Do, and I didn't know how to pronounce any of these words, so I could see them printed in my mind. But,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, the McCarriban means that you are subject to the earth's code of law, and only that. And if you stay with that, you will stay healthy, and you will be okay. You will be in line with destiny. You will do everything you need to do in the right way, according to the natural world. If you veer away from that, then you got trouble.
And that's where we are, right?
Yeah, and that's where we've gone. Humans have a tendency to do that. Why? You could debate that forever. There's lots of conversations I've had with people over that. But the point is, I try to stay true to McCarriban, and I teach other people to stay true to it, because then they do feel more empowered. They do feel better about themselves. If you can do that, it really is worth it. And start that journey towards thinking like that, and it will help enormously.
So how does somebody start that journey? What should they do if they're hearing this and they think, I want to live that way? Tell me what to do to start.
Yeah. I think one of the first things, there's two things you do. I think to familiarize yourself with the earth the way she is. Go and walk in the wood, go and walk by the sea, by rivers, just get out there with nature. That's part one. Part two is start to think of yourself as not being divine. You are not divine. You are not the best thing since sliced bread, or whatever the saying is. You are a part of the earth. You are derived from the earth. So you owe it to the earth to do this. I think that could be something you could say to yourself at the beginning of your journey. I owe it to the earth to do this. I owe it to my ancestors of 5,000 years ago. I owe it to everyone who ever responded to the law of Makerabun. And I think that law, although it's a Romani law, I think it really runs through most tribal people. Most tribal people put the earth first, and that's what we should be doing. So yeah, I'm not somebody who always uses the word healing. When I use it, I mean manage life. Yeah. Because that's what we've got to do. We've got to learn to manage life if we're going to heal ourselves. Learn what it's about. And that's where the Romani comes in, isn't it? Because we can learn to look it in the eye, see it square on, see it as it is, and go on from there. But we must remember that nothing's our fault. We can start that journey and start to believe in ourselves and believe that we can do what we need to do. So goes on from there.
At the end of the rope, and they can't deal with the world as it is, I would like to say to them to hold on, that it's probably not you, it's probably the world. And what would you say to somebody who felt that way right now?
Yes, self-belief, I think, is at the top of the list. I would say start off by finding the things you love doing. There's always something you love doing, whether it's playing music, whether it's dancing, whether it's singing, whether it's doing a craft. I think you've really got to put your energy into that if you're suffering. Start with that. I always advocate that people do that. Don't go too far with expecting you're going to, get better or cure yourself straight away. It doesn't happen. Nothing happens overnight. Right. You've got to do steady, slow steps, and then don't blame yourself. Don't criticize yourself. Try to get rid of that weird, argumentative inner voice that we all carry around with us that tells you you're no good, that tells you. It's easy to do that. I know that. It's easy for all of us to do that in the sort of world we live in, and it's crushing. It's a crushing feeling, isn't it?
It is, and I feel like it's imposed on us from all sides.
It is imposed on us, and it's easy to fall into that. And I think that's where we can think about our ancestors of 5,000 years ago. They wouldn't have had this. They wouldn't have suffered depression and anxiety and lack of self-belief and inner this and inner that. They would have thought, what's that? They would have asked, what's that? Because they were just living naturally, normally, and simply. That's another word, simple. Be simple. Yeah. So I think narrowing it down and finding something you enjoy, whether it's walking, it doesn't matter how simple it is. Don't go too far. Do the simple things, and then gradually take small steps and move on from there. And then that self-belief will gradually come.
You have to tell people about the different ways that they can work with you.
The different ways they can work with me. Well, workshops are the best thing. I hold workshops at the moment. They're only in the UK and are good if you can get to them. I am trying as much as I can to try and make this available for people who live outside the UK, either by coming back, to visit America again where I can, or going anywhere really where I can, or arranging something where people can come over here if they wish to, and we do a longer course in something so it's worth their while. Generally, that's the best way I can do it at the moment. I am doing also arranging to do some online programs for people who can't get to me. That's a good one. I'm doing a shamanic counseling course, which the whole world is interested in at the moment. Okay. But of course, I'm going to have to structure something for people who live outside the UK so that they can join in with that as well. I'm working on it all. Otherwise, there's readings that people can have. Sometimes people have readings with me. They can be very informative. If they want to ask a question about something, that works, and we can discuss what I get with them afterwards. And believe me, your unconscious will provide for you what you need to know. And we say it comes from the Z, which is the soul. You must have seen that word in the books.
Absolutely. Yeah. Touch briefly on a passage. I think it was from Coming Home to the Trees, but it could have been from We Borrow the Earth. It was the longest, most wonderful rhapsody on earthworms that I have ever, and I don't think I'll ever look at an earthworm the same way, because I kind of feel they're holy now after having read your description. So could you talk a little bit about earthworms?
Yeah. I can't remember which book it was from either, because they merge, don't they, sometimes? Right. But yeah, I went to a conference that was full of academic people who were interested in my culture. I couldn't believe the way they all crammed into a room. I didn't think they would do that. But I had a worm, and it was in a little Tupperware type of container, and it had foil on the top with air holes so it could bring the earth in there. And I was talking about the idea that the worm, if you have problems, you offload them onto the worm, and then because the worm goes down into the ground, he or she will take them down and release them in the lower world. And I remember in this conference sitting there with this worm and all these important academics coming into the room. And it was quite funny, really. But they were riveted by the story of this worm. And I said, if anybody's got anything they want to let go of, we'll just have a quiet moment and ask the worm if he or she will kindly take these away, and then I will take it away. And this is what I did. I took it away I was staying with my friend up in Newcastle in the north of England, and together we released the worm, and the worm burrowed down and took it. Now the reason for this is because the lower world is the place where you should release all your things you don't want, all the problems and everything. And at winter solstice time, it's the best time to do that if you haven't got a worm. So if you've got a worm, or if you've got something that goes down there, I mean, we've got an ancestor that does that for us, who at winter solstice says, I will have to go through the lower world because it's part of the journey I do. And he volunteers. He's a remarkable person, actually, to take everything we don't want at that special time where there's a theme going into the new year, taking the stuff down. So the worm does the same thing. Everything can go to the lower world, and there it stays, because that's where it belongs. The upper world is different, but the lower world is the place where you release everything. And I think it's because the earth is so compacted, it sort of holds things. So, I mean, it holds plants when they grow, it holds all sorts of things. So the worm does a good service by taking the things we don't want away for us.
It was so beautiful, and such a good example of how your work can help refocus our minds on things that we take for granted so in such a dastardly way every single day. And it's easy to do. I do it myself. I'm not blaming anybody. It's easy to do. What is magic? I want to ask you before I let you go.
What is
magic? What is magic?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think magic. I really think magic, it covers a multitude of things. I mean, I think magic, when it's attached to more sort of occulty things, which it's done today, I don't understand it like this. I'm not overly familiar with witchcraft or all these things, because for me they are modern inventions. Magic for me is when something happens that you don't expect, something that helps you, like an omen. For instance, I've been communicating with a lady who's been going through a very bad time. She's been hacked. All sorts of things have happened to her. And I was thinking of her, and 5 geese flew over my head. Now, the number 5, you could say, is magic, because it's a very powerful number, and it's a very lucky number. So I told her this, and it filled her with joy to think that there's something working for her. Now, that is magic to me, because it happens unexpectedly. I didn't know that geese were going to fly over me. Magic happens when there's a dawn. or when there's a sunset and you happen to look at it and you think, oh my God, the sky is so beautiful at this time. Magic happens when your cat walks into the room and purrs. Magic happens when you have a nice dinner in front of you because you're grateful for having some lovely food and maybe sharing it with friends. Magic happens on a walk in a wood, and you look at the trees and the sunlight is falling through the trees, or the moonlight. Magic happens in very many ways. So that's the way I prefer to see magic, not particularly as an occult thing, because I think we go into a strange area with that. I think we need to look at the everyday things that help to nourish us, the simple things that we can find every day when we open the curtains and we look out and we see the daylight. I mean, the daylight is the sun. If that isn't magic, I don't know what is, because without the sun, we couldn't live. So,
and it's so far away. And if we were any closer, it would burn us to death. And if we were any further away, we would freeze to death.
Daylight is the magic bit, because daylight comes from the sun. And Cam, the sun, gives us the daylight. And that is a very powerful thing. It's, the daylight is sacred. We always say it's sacred, the daylight. Just as the nighttime could be,
right.
It's all got its own sacredness because it's all provided by the natural world.
And that returns me to the theme of your work that has been so beneficial to me, is that everything is sacred. Yeah. Right? Maybe not our little plastic gig gags that we spend money on and make children produce in factories, but everything else, more or less, is sacred.
Yeah, it's life, isn't it? That's it. We are not sacred as such, but the fact that we're given life is a sacred thing, and the fact that we have the natural world still here, just about, with the way everybody's treating it, is a sacred thing. So we just need to, I think, appreciate what you've got. I know we all suffer with all sorts of things, but if we can find those things we love and the things we can appreciate, then we can move on from there.
Right. Well, on that note, your work is truly magical to me. That is magic, because it has helped me so much, and you didn't know me. Just the idea of the fact that someone in another part of the world can take his life and make something of it that had such, I'm getting teary thinking about it, that had such a wonderful impact on me. That's magic to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really grateful for your input, and thank you.
Thank you, Jasper. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
And that's it for episode 2 of Empower Your Magical Self. I really hope you enjoyed that. I feel so empowered by Jasper, and I hope that you will engage with his work further, because he has a lot to offer, things that I don't think you're going to find anywhere else, and I'm so happy to be able to bring that interview to you. Please join us back here next Wednesday when my guest will be the Money Witch.
And they don't care. You know what I mean? Like, the overlords of capitalism aren't impacted by your lack of empowerment, right? Except in their capacity then to not have to grapple with you for power. It's very easy for them to take power when we're not also trying to take power.
She has a lot to offer too, and so do you. So please go out and empower your magical self and engage with me online. Let me know how you're enjoying the show and how are you empowering your magical self, because that's what it's all about, darling. We're all energy, and we can all find our power and our magic. Love you, baby.